Hello? Can we start? I can see the... Simone, I don't have the link. Huh? I don't have the link.
You're on it right now. You are in the...
Yeah, I'm not on the meeting. No.
She's not. Okay, I'm gonna use mine then.
Okay, you give me this?
Use
You don't need this? Okay. Can you hear me?
Wait, for the PPT, then we have to do like this. Wait, Regina,
Can they hear me?
right now we are on mute. This is the thing we need to open.
Okay.
You are going to have to be the one who is going through the slides.
Okay. Okay. Please admit everyone.
Admit.
Can you admit there?
Admit all.
And can we hear the people speak? Hello to everyone. I'm just checking if you are listening to me. I'm like really sorry. I know that we are a little bit late, but we had a meeting that was a little bit longer also in the morning. So the people, they didn't have such a long time for having lunch. I know this is a little bit particular because we're half online and actually we're 80% online and a little bit of the public here. But I'm really thanking all the speakers that are going to introduce now. Okay. So can you hear me? Yes, can Sean or someone there, can you just make this if you can hear me? Okay, great. Okay. So I'm sharing screen there, no? Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Actually, we cannot hear in the general thing. Maybe I'm asking my teams. We cannot hear the speakers when they speak. Non ci sentiamo le persone che parlano. Quando loro parlano, dove si senti? E le cuffie? Okay, so I'm going to start because this is just going to be a little bit of the presentation. So welcome everyone to this roundtable of the World Union of Wholesale Market conference in Florence. This is the first time that we're organizing online and on-site event, and it's the first international conference that Florence is hosting after the COVID pandemic. So we're really glad to have this opportunity to meet in real, and we're really glad also to be all here together with such important actors of all the food sector in order to try to find foster solutions and new pathways for ensuring better fresh food distribution system. So what is this WUWM 2021 conference? This conference aims to connect wholesale markets, but also all major stakeholders of the fresh food sector: farmers, international organizations, market experts, NGOs, and local authorities. We're discussing what are the lessons learned from the current pandemic that we were discussing particularly this morning, what are the steps that we can collectively take to recover and ensure more resilience and sustainability on the food systems, and what are the kind of solutions that we can envision or we can develop in order to achieve the goal of supplying the world with healthy, accessible, and sustainable diets in the forthcoming decades. I think that every one of you is already mute, so please try to put your name in the Zoom meeting so we can identify you. And we're going to start this roundtable that is called Fostering Healthy Food Consumption Patterns in the Post-COVID World. So, as you all know, today there's still globally fresh food consumption, even if it's growing, there are still 3 billion people around the world that lack access to healthy diets. More than 2 billion adults are at the same time overweight and obese. And this diet release non-communicable diseases, including diabetes, cancer, and heart disease, are among the leading causes of global death. In addition, over 120 million people remain to live in constant hunger. So I'm going to introduce different key speakers today that will give us fresh insights, and they will share with expertise with us in order to see better what is the actual situation and also what are the pathways that we could take in order to change and to foster not just sustainable food systems, but also to change patterns of consumption in different regions of the world. So let me introduce Dr. Lujain Al-Kodami from EAT. She's Director of Global Action, and she's also pretty engaged in action track number 2 of United Nations Food Systems Summit. Dr. Al-Mojani, you have the word.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Also to share
Normally you can share your screen, Simona. 1 second. Yes, your screen.
to join you in this important discussions regarding the role of the wholesale markets in the road for sustainable food system transformation. In the last couple of years, it has been the year of food science, where we have been overwhelmed with the increasing evidence of the need of radical and urgent transformation of our food systems into healthy and sustainable ones, including the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their special report on climate change and land, the report of the Elite Lancet that set up for the first time scientific targets for healthy and sustainable diet, the planetary health diets, and the planetary boundaries for food systems, and many others that showed increasing evidence that we need to act urgently in order to deliver on the Paris Agreement on the Sustainable Development Goals. Despite the current food systems, they have huge impacts on health, not just of the planet, but also the health of people, with increasing rates of malnutrition, including undernutrition, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. And actually, the obesity have suffered the most due to the COVID pandemic. But focusing also on the health of the planet, our current broken food systems have accelerated the extinction rates, and they're affecting several species, in addition to the ones that have been extinct already. The impact of the climate change, the oceans, the land, nutrition and phosphorus pollution, and all of that has been put in the food systems, a huge burden on our planets with a massive environmental footprints. There was a recent report that was published by Potsdam Climate Institute that have actually stated that if the current consumption trends continue by 2050, they estimated that the global food demand will increase by 50%, and that include increased demand for animal source foods, including meats and milk, will most likely double. And that will translate its impacts on people, where we'll have more than 4 billion people to be overweight, 1.5 billion to be obese, while at the same time, we'll continue to suffer from a double burden of malnutrition, with around 500 million people continue to be underweight. So the continued trend of food consumption, the increasing rate of food waste, continue to produce food from unsustainable production system, will have a huge burden on our planet and will make our carbon footprints completely out of control, which makes it impossible to limit the global warming to less than 2 degrees, even not even 1.5. And this is the latest report that was just launched last year by the Global Nutrition Report, where we see increasing burdens of malnutrition. We're having 1.9 billion adults are overweight. And even when we look at children, for example, 38 million under the age of 5 are overweight or obese. And the continuous rate of undernutrition, including stunting, wasting, and having almost 500,000 adults underweight. And looking from the environmental perspective, the acceleration in the global food systems has been estimated to be responsible for up to 37% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Its effects on indoor air pollutions, effects on ocean, and of course, effects on land use. And this is why, in addition to that, from equitable and economic perspective, the cost of the current food system is also costing us a lot. That's been estimated by around 12 trillion US dollars. And this is a 2 trillion US dollars above its estimated annual net value generation. So affecting the health of the people, the health of the planet, as well as the global economy. And that's why we have here at EATS, we are focusing on sustainable food system transformation. So EATS is a international platform, science-based, that bring different stakeholders together, including governments, cities, private sectors, decision maker, chefs, investors, youth, and others to foster partnerships, co-create solution, and translate science to action. So part of our DNA actually is to connect the 3 dots. First, knowledge, covering the knowledge gaps and coming with real evidence for food system transformation. Second, engagement, building partnerships and engagement across sectors and across stakeholders. And third, action, which is translating the knowledge and research into actions, including policies and business action. Part of the work that we do here at EATS is actually the UN Food System Summit, which I'm sure that you heard a lot today in the previous sessions. Through our executive chair and founder, Dr. Gunhild Stordalen, is leading actually Action Track 2, which is focusing on shifting to sustainable consumption patterns. And that's covered dietary shifts, as well as halving food waste, together with our UN anchoring agency, the World Health Organization. So what we want to achieve for that is that by September, we have proposed a menu of solutions propositions that have been sourced from different parts of the world, from different sectors and actors, and announcing strong game-changing action coalitions that will take these propositions further and implementing them based on the national priorities by different stakeholders. But since our action track is a bit unique because we cannot really shift consumption patterns without engaging with citizens, without engaging with consumers. So in parallel to that, we're building a global movement of people to inform their food choices and make them change their food decisions, demanding action by their governments and business to make the healthy and sustainable food choice the easy choice and the desirable choice. So the changes that we want to see, first, we want the consumers to be enabled, empowered, motivated to choose healthy and sustainable dietary options. And which are the dietary healthy options? Primarily fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Sustainably produced healthy proteins, including dairy, eggs, seafood, and meats. And these options to be available, accessible to all. But at the global level, especially look at the Western diets, to curb the excessive consumption of animal source foods, in particular red meat, and the consumption of junk food, including sugar sweetened beverage and unhealthy processed or ultra processed food. And of course, we cannot shift to sustainable consumption patterns without looking at food waste. So, to deliver on SDG target 12.3, to have food waste from food service, retail, and household level, and to ensure that the food is delivered is actually safe. So, addressing issues such as zoonotic diseases and antimicrobial resistance. Now, zooming a bit in relation to the dietary shift piece and how to motivate consumer, I found this slide is quite interesting actually, from the Center for Behavior and Environment, RARE, which we are using it to come up with applicable, relevant, and smart solutions for the summit. So understanding the behavior change and what kind of factors we need to focus on. First, the material incentives in relation to the affordability of that kind of food, the convenience of the healthy and sustainable food. Second, the choice architecture, changing the context in which the choices are made and make those food choices available. Third, the rules and regulation that could either restrict or promote the consumers' behavior that are imposed at a national level as well as a local level. Fourth, the social influences, and that affects the beliefs, the expectations from other, what kind of social norms that are imposed on the individual. Information, education, what kind of information that are available, and why is it healthy and sustainable foods matter, and why it has to be the choice of the consumer. And then the last but not least, which is a very important element, is the emotional appeal of food, the emotional message that drive behavior. And unfortunately, this element is not always visible and explicit when we come up with action and policies in relation to dietary shifts. So here we focus on two areas. One in relation to healthy food environments. So the goal is to create healthy, safe, equitable, sustainable food environments to enable people, all people, to adopt and maintain healthy dietary practices. So what does that entail? First, in relation to policy measures, including tools, legal capacity, innovations, networks, in relation to physical policies that decreases the consumption of the unhealthy dietary options and increases the consumption of the healthy ones through subsidies as well as the social safety nets. Labeling, not just the nutrition information, but also the carbon footprint of the food options. Where has the food been produced? How has it been produced? And it's coming from sustainable food production systems or not? The procurement policies, where the food is procured, marketing restrictions, and an example for that is prohibiting marketing for sugar-sweetened beverage that's targeting children, or marketing as an enabler, which is marketing the healthy choice, increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables, for example. And at the national level, setting clear benchmarks and targets that are tailored per country, including its national context, its economy, its culture, to track its consumption patterns and to be measured as part of its own national food system pathway. In addition to that, we focus on the value chain, the dining environment, the display of the food, by supporting the food value chains to provide a safe and diverse food supply to consumers, what kind of food environment at school, hospital, workplace, and other healthcare facilities where this food is offered, and also looking at retail environments, restaurants, for example. And one solution that also came up, for example, where the default choice is a sustainable and healthy choice, could be plant-based. When you travel on a plane, I already took the flight where you have to actually choose that you want meat or seafood in the menu rather than the other way around. And then last but not least, food market access, also to empower the small-scale farmers, the SMEs, to provide safe, sustainable, and healthy food supply. In addition to the healthy food environment, it's important to also work on consumers' perception of healthy, sustainable diets in relation to the product experience, consumer motivations, and capabilities. So the food itself, it's not enough to say it's only health and sustainable. It also has to be desirable by the consumers. So working on the quality, taste, value perception, and the convenience of the food. Second, focusing on issues such as product reformulation, innovation in plant-based foods, innovation in healthy food, or sustainably produced animal source food, while of course trying to stay away from ultra processed options. Then the chef training programs, focusing on the culinary sides, what could be a tasty, healthy, and sustainable recipes that are easily applicable by the consumers, and focusing more on the consumer knowledge, education, awareness, cooking skills, and emotion. And none of that would be possible by one stakeholder or one sector alone, but actually success to shift the consumption patterns to healthy and sustainable ones, transform our food system, deliver on the SDGs and the Paris agreements, cannot be done alone, but actually by engagement with different stakeholders and different actors. And here is just an example of who those stakeholders could be, including governments, private sector, civil society, UN, indigenous group, consumer groups, and so on and so forth. And of course, one of those groups is the wholesale markets that has an important role to play in relation to in making the food accessible, available, and safe, as well as the transparency of how that food is provided with an easy access, especially from the local producers into the to consumers and their consumer staples. I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lujain, for all these proposals, and I think that can you hear me there? Yes? Thank you so much. I think that you are like really drawing quite a clear image of the path and the concrete actions that we can take in order to help citizens around the world to make easier choices of healthier food and to enhance this transformation based in consumers' knowledge and also in consumers' behavioral approaches. Now we're going to to listen to Christopher Mejia from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that is going to make us a presentation on how to foster also intake of healthier food around the world. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good afternoon for you. Well, my name is Chris Mejia, as already mentioned by Eugenia. So I'm the director and founder of the MIT Food and Retail Operations Lab, and also the director of the Scale Latin America Network. So thanks for the invitation to the organizers, and especially to Eugenia Carrara, the General Secretary of the World Union of Wholesale Markets, okay? So basically, let me get started because we have a very tight agenda. So to get started, I need to explain you a little bit more of what we do here, okay? So the MIT Scale Network for Latin America and the Caribbean is an alliance of 38 top prestigious universities in Latin America and the Caribbean, plus an MIT Scale Latin American Center that we call the Center for Latin American Logistics Innovation. We do work in logistics, freight transportation, supply chain management to face or to address the most important challenges in the region. One of the most important challenges, as you can imagine, and that's why we are here, is related to supply chain management for food and agribusiness. And actually, I represent, together with a group of colleagues who are present here today as well in the event, virtually, unfortunately, a multidisciplinary group that work in the topic in the region, but also in the world, under the vision of the Food and Retail Operations Lab. So specifically, I'm talking about over 30 colleagues from around 20 universities located in Latin America and the Caribbean. And all of us, we are working for the same goal, that is making a better world through long-term sustainable food ecosystems. So now let me get started what is important here, right? So probably you have listened all of these figures during all this morning, if you were present during the whole event, but let me summarize a few of them. So in the top chart, what you can see is that people is suffering malnutrition, and 30% of the world is actually the percentage that is suffering this problem. So we are talking about 2.7 billion people suffering this any form of malnutrition, food insecurity, obesity, or actually overweight. So unfortunately, these numbers keep growing, especially in emerging market economies. And now with the pandemic, something that has happened is that these numbers have exacerbated and grow dramatically in different regions, especially in Latin America, where the progress that we have gained over decades has been lost in the last 2 years. So in the bottom part of this chart, basically what you can do in the left side is what is the mortality rate that we observe, especially when comparing different countries. And as you can imagine, those countries that are developing countries are suffering the most the lack of fruits, vegetables, and legumes. And unfortunately, this has been highly correlated to a higher number of deaths due to cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, and other types of diseases as well. So, but this is not the only problem. The problem is that also the cost of malnutrition are really high. They represent around $5.5 trillion annually. And this is more or less like 7.5% of the world's GDP. So just for your information. Now, why is this important for us to know and what we can do related to this? So let me remind you that as this has been mentioned during the morning, there is a growing population, especially in cities, right? But also keep in mind that 60% of this population is living with less than $5 per day. And this is one of the biggest issues here is the lack of assortment, the accessibility, the affordability, and the availability to fresh food, as you can see in these charts. So now let me bring you to a higher point of view. And basically what I want to tell you here, if you, well, hopefully you will follow my ideas here. Let's start from here, from food malnutrition. So basically this is a system dynamics approach. So basically I'm gonna be telling you what is the relationship between a couple of variables and if it's positive or negative. So in this case, higher the malnutrition, so lower the economic growth. Okay, in the region or specifically in a company, for example. So higher the economic growth, higher the productivity at work that this person is going to have. Higher the productivity at work of each individual, higher the country's economic performance, higher the economic performance of that country, so lower the poverty rates. So higher the poverty rates, unfortunately, higher is going to be the malnutrition. So if you multiply these signs as you used to do in the elementary school, you will see that multiplying plus by minus by plus, etc., etc. This gives a positive polarity, and this is called a reinforcing loop. So basically, this means that the food malnutrition creates a vicious circle in which is going to be putting the brakes of the economic growth. But unfortunately, this is not only breaking on the economic growth, but also the social development and the education, creating some kind of social backwardness. And on the other hand, also the health of people. So this is creating a health burden. So as you can imagine, this is a big issue because it impacts many different factors, many different systems, socioeconomic systems, and also the healthcare system. So that's why we study this problem, and it's super interesting. So now let me give you our perspective on this. So we consider that WUWM should work in the 5 pillars that we are working, and let me mention them quickly. So we are talking about combat food malnutrition, okay, reducing the food loss and the food waste, ensuring the food safety, empowering smallholder farmers, and by empowering, I'm also meaning like to strengthening their different capacities. And at the center, basically what we want to create is more sustainable food ecosystem, you know? But this doesn't start from nothing. We really need to understand how this works. And for that, we really need to create like a multi-process vision. And we need to start from a strategy. We really need to understand what we want to do with this system. Then afterwards, we need to start understanding and mapping each of the different processes, distribution, packing, picking, etc. Everything related to food production, food distribution, and of course, everything related to the end consumer. That's pretty important, and that's the part that I'm gonna deep dive in a moment. With regards to the stakeholders' behavior, that's extremely important. If a person changes their behavior, or an intermediary, or even the farmer, or the producer, manufacturer, or the distributors, the drivers, so we can drive change in the whole system. And then afterwards, and only afterwards, we can start talking about technology, because otherwise we will put like trash in, trash out. And we really need to understand the systems in order to start using technology and optimize them. And last but not least, we need to connect this to governance and politics. Otherwise, we will have like a tremendous problem there. Actually, this morning, Dr. Palottini mentioned the importance of reducing fresh items from wholesale markets, but we don't need to connect this with the reverse logistics to next stakeholders, community kitchens, food banks, and people in need, preserving the safety and the good quality of the different products. So on the other hand, we really need to keep like these eyes open in order to see that this follows like a multidisciplinary approach. If you think about this system, you can think about spatial geography to understand the resource availability, the degradation of the soil, as well as the location of the farmers, as well as the location of the wholesale market, or even the food deserts and vulnerable population segments. On the other hand, you can use nutrition, that is the topic that I will dive in a moment, to design well-based intervention schemes to increase the awareness of people via incentives, more information, or creating not just to change their behavior and motivate shifting patterns on them. The last 2 elements that I want to mention here is agronomy, that is everything related to how to use the resources available, water, soil, how to rotate the crops, how to reduce degradation, how to optimize harvesting periods, and also how to improve agricultural practices. With regards to logistics, that is the last topic, this connects everything, right? So it's how to bring fresher, healthier food to population segments, facilitate the distribution, and recover food to reinsert it in the value chain. So what is going to be the role of the wholesale market in all of this? Well, it's basically serving as an orchestrator of all of this system. So why the healthy diets are important? Well, accessibility and availability and affordability are mainly related to the supply side. In the accessibility part, we can work with food access models. We can start pushing effective processes to ensure the availability and the quality of the products that we have there, in order to make them, available on hand and geographically to the populations who need the most, okay? Affordability is everything related to reduce like the price and the cost, but we should target the pricing strategies. Otherwise, we will end up having no advance on that. And this is very related to what the previous speaker was saying. So we agree with it, who presented a lot of very good insights. The other thing is the development of subsidies for the people who need the most to enhance the intake of healthier products. Finally, and this is everything related to the demand side, is creating consumer awareness. And we can do this twofold. On the one hand, creating educational programs for end consumers, but also for shopkeepers inside the wholesale markets to motivate this, because the assortment is a big problem. If a shopkeeper that does not want to sell this type of products, well, we're going to be facing a big issue, right? The other thing is related to shaping demand for healthcare products. There are so many ways in which we can do this, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to mention too many. Probably I'm going to reduce this to say that using technology, we can also control what we can offer to the people, and also, like try to create a better accessibility to this product. So last but not least, I want to leave a few questions to reflect together. The first one is, what should be the role, or what is the relative contribution of wholesale markets to healthy consumption? So probably the first question is, are we able to answer first question already? Or we don't need to start quantifying it? So based on the work that I'm doing together with a few colleagues, for example, the nutritionist Dr. Tatiana Sadala, who I think is in the room, we have learned that the macronutrient perspective would be more effective, but by that we need to quantify not only the calories or the carbohydrates, but also the protein, the water content, and other macronutrients, because the micronutrients will change a lot depending on each individual and the cooking practices. So, and I think that if we pay attention to that, we will be able to really understand what to do. For example, what about the haunches market alone could measure how this is impacting the life of French people and all the visitors there. So the second question that is not written there is, what is the role that the wholesale markets could play to foster the future of food ecosystems and proper governance? The other one is actually written there, is how should we align changes in the demand and provide visibility? This brings me to the concept of collaborative supply chain. So it's data synchronization, aligning goals, creating incentives, and then sharing assets, human talent, and also creating a shared knowledge base that I think is super important. And the role of wholesale markets should be creating some kind of a bridge between the markets, the farmers, and of course the rest of the stakeholders there. The other topic is how to change the traditional business model. And this is something that we have been doing a lot with my group and my colleagues in order to take advantage of the wholesale market's muscle and the capacity to support many more people by connecting farmers of all sizes and types to all the population segments, including also like small retailers and through street markets. We have developed some projects about how to bring healthy baskets in Brazil, in India, and also what should be the role of street markets together with the wholesale markets in Valparaiso, Chile, together with my colleague, Professor Gonzalo Mejia. The second big topic would be boosting the understanding of end consumers with nutrition's lens. The other one, for the sake of time, is evolving the role of wholesale markets to become a marketplace to farmers and other value-added services like sorting, cooking, transforming the food while ensuring food safety. These supplies work hand in hand with even dark kitchens and recovering food through food banking networks, like with the Global Food Banking Network, with whom we have been developing many projects too. And the last question is how the future looks like. So I really think that the wholesale market should evolve to bring nutrition to all people while preserving quality of the food and boosting the rise of short supply chains in a robust way, enhancing local economy and building a small to small food ecosystems. But the next question, and with that part I'm going to close, is, are we prepared for that future? What are the assets, the human talent, the knowledge, and the relationships that we need to build for the wholesale markets in different parts of the world for making this happen organically in the coming years? So hopefully this creates like provoking ideas on your side. And well, it was a pleasure. I was supported by my colleague, Claudia Antonini, in this presentation. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank Chris for your presentation. And as always, it's super rich to speak with you and to have all these inputs and open questions that you're also asking for wholesales and wholesale markets. And I hope that we're going to be able to give you answers. If not now, I think in the long term, where our different wholesale markets around the world are probably going to be happy to exchange with you. Simona, can you put the slides, because I cannot see them? He's still sharing. So now, we're going to listen. Yeah, tremendous. Okay. So now we're going to listen to Alexandra Nikopalapopoulou. We have been working a lot with Alexandra, and I'm really happy to see her here again.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to this hybrid event. I am Alexandra Nikolakopoulou. I'm the head of unit in DG Sante in the European Commission, responsible for the fork strategy and some of the key measures of this strategy. As you know, the European Commission has adopted before the COVID pandemic the Green Deal, which is the new sustainability agenda for the EU. The sustainability of the food systems is really at the heart of the Green Deal. And I'm glad to see also that sustainability today is not only environmental sustainability, but it tackles also the social dimension, including the health dimension. Making the healthy choice and the sustainable choice, the easy choice for consumers, is also one of the key objectives of the Farm to Fork strategy. A lot has been said about the problems of obesity, of malnutrition. I think the situation globally is very worrying, equally also in the EU. In the EU, it is clear that the food consumption patterns are not in line with the dietary guidelines. And also, more than half of the EU adult population also is suffering from obesity. So the transition to sustainable food systems cannot happen if we do not tackle the issue of diet and if there is not a shift in people's diet. So how do we do that? Also, many actions and many solutions have been proposed and put on the table by the previous speakers, which shows clearly that the diet is not only an issue of individual choice. Clearly, there are many factors which are personal factors, but there are also other elements that influence this choice. More particularly the food prices, the information that we can see on the food marketing, so what we call the food environment. And here the EU is proposing a series of actions to improve the food environment and to make the healthier choice the easiest choice. So there are many actions on the agenda of the EU for the coming years. First of all, in the area of labeling, the EU, the Commission, will propose a mandatory front-of-pack labeling, nutritional labeling. It will also establish the nutrient profiles to ensure that there is the foods which are high in fat or sugar. We restrict the promotion of those foods. It will also work to establish a more comprehensive, sustainable labeling, covering the different dimensions of food sustainability. And it will also propose the establishment of mandatory sustainability criteria in public procurement. So all these measures that I have mentioned, they are mandatory measures, there are legislative measures. At the same time, given that the question of diet is rather complicated, we see that voluntary measures and engagement also from the food sector and from food business is also very important. Therefore, the European Commission has initiated in the last months a process of collaboration between all relevant stakeholders, meaning particular with the targeting the middle part of the food chain. so food industry, retailers, food services and hospitality. And also together with NGOs, farmers, other and also individual companies, we have agreed on a voluntary code of conduct. The aim is to seek commitments, voluntary, ambitious commitments from stakeholders and individual companies in the area of food sustainability. This code, I'm happy to say, will be officially launched and signed on the 5th of July. And it contains a part which is relevant for EU umbrella associations who are ready to support with the actions the transition to sustainable food systems. It also contains a second part which is targeting individual companies, asking them to come with concrete, tangible, measurable commitments. These commitments and these actions and targets, they concern three areas mainly. One area is the shift to healthy and sustainable consumption patterns. The second area is to improve and to make more sustainable the internal operations of the companies. And the third is to work on sustainable food value chains. In the area of health, there are aspirational objectives and indicative actions like reformulation, reduction of the portion and serving sizes, marketing practices, and other actions. Unfortunately, one very important issue which has to do with prices and affordability of the healthy choices has not been covered by the code. It is, as you can imagine, a rather difficult question for food industry. The code will be promoted and presented also in the UN Food Summit as a game-changing solution. So we hope and we want to encourage also to stimulate this inclusive process and this collaborative process. For the EU, this is the beginning of the process. It's not the adoption and the agreement of the code will initiate further collaboration. So the governance and the implementation of this code of conduct will be very important. The monitoring also of the commitments. And also the enablers, what we as EU will put in place to support companies in this transition, and in particular SMEs, which are almost 90% of the EU businesses. So we will mobilize different tools to support financially, to provide also advice and to facilitate and stimulate exchange of best practices. Certainly with the time, we have to review the efficiency of the code, adapt the commitments, the level of ambition, and decide whether all this is sufficient or whether more action is needed, particularly in that case to shift to legislative action. So therefore, we would like really to encourage companies and trade associations also to look into the code, which is available on the website of the DG Sante at the moment, and to commit to this collaborative approach and collaborative process that we have put in place, I would say, in record time, and to showcase really how collectively we can transform our system and make it more sustainable. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. We have been working a lot with the European Commission and the World Union of Wholesale Market. The European group was member of the task force that was drafting this participative and multi-stakeholder code of conduct. And we do think that this code can be a real milestone to get together all the actors into a common track and start and start this pathway that is not going to be easy, but we do have to take. And we're really happy to hear that the European Commission is thinking about presenting it to the United Nations Food System Summit. I'm going to give now the floor to the Director of Retail Market of the World Union of Wholesale Markets, Jean-Paul Auguste.
Good afternoon. How to start as a market representative? We are in a world with mass production and mass retail, and at the risk of losing diversity of products, diversity of seeds when agriculture is offering us products, if the mass production is concentrating on a little range of vegetables and fruits, we could lose that diversity. We could lose also the diversity of retail. And I would use the image of the body. There are central vessels and there are secondary vessels. A body cannot afford to lose the secondary vessels. And where markets now in some developed countries have lost some edge compared to the big supermarket chains, there is that risk. In underdeveloped countries, now the risk is clear. If they don't protect that diversity of the retail and the agriculture, they will lose, like us, their potential, their capital. So the fight is the same in every country. The problem we have in the world is the dispersion of power authorities when going on local points. There are perhaps hundreds of thousands of local governments. There are perhaps 1,000 of big supermarket chains. So when international organization wants to get the power to implement that food strategy, we need to have a clear language to help the local government to implement the right planning policy, urban planning policy, and the right pedagogy with schools, with social services, to get the right message and protect that diversity. So this is a preliminary comment. What can market do now to help and implement the right food policy? They have first to maintain access from the farm to their trade place. The message is the same for wholesale and retail because they are obliged to work together to give the verticality of the service from the farm to the table. And this work, we try within the World Union to implement that and transfer the message. What could I add? There are very simple things sometimes to give the pedagogy. What is a market, local market? This is perhaps the last social place physically we can go on. The rest could be online. In a local government, you could go to the social services. There is an office. You are going alone. To go on the marketplace is the last place you are meeting people, discussing with people, having a live experience, and perhaps also to have access to the product. The supermarket chains, for example, are proposing many products, but under packaging. This is somehow artificial. On the local market, you can have access directly to the product, a fruit, a vegetable, give a name to something. The same about ecological needs. We enliven in the last 50 years a sort of, it's not again the USA, a sort of Americanization of the society, of the space. When a little population is living in a very big surface, space is not a problem. You can flatten the land and build everywhere. In a world now on the planet with limited space and cities growing and growing, we cannot live that. So will we go with our car to peripheral centers, or will we have few people going in the city center and delivering the product? So it's where the waste in energy, the waste in time, the waste in competence, skills, means that markets are putting on the right place near where people are inhabiting the skills, experience, the pedagogy, live to the people going on the place. And there are, I could give an example. Why not have primary schools coming on markets with teachers and the kids and saying, is it a fish? It's not a square blank thing under packaging. There is a whole fish. And I know now what is a red millet, what is a turbot, and if it's a fruit, I know it's not a canned fruit, it's a grapefruit. This is it. So the pedagogy is for free. Who's using that tool? Quite no one. So market operators have really to offer that access to that pedagogy, and the administrations and the local government have to use it. It's very simple, it's not costly, and it would be efficient. Where we are organizing a local market campaign, Love Your Local Market, wholesale and retail markets working together, we are having such experience with schools invited. During 4-5 weeks, we are seeing the parents coming because the kid wanted the parents to come and have the same experience. So it's only an example of very simple things which could work on top of a classical, national pedagogy, education, etc. So markets are fully opened to be part of that. Retail markets are certainly closer to the population, to the real final buyer, and retail market needs the certainty to get access to the food, certainty which can be given by the wholesale. That was all I wanted to tell you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul, for this intervention and for explaining to a lot of us, because sometimes as we are the middle invisible in the wholesale market, sometimes there are some actors that cannot see what is the role to structurate the whole food supply chain, and particularly to guarantee that retailers will have in a daily basis access to the right amount of volumes that they need to trade, so that they need to put into sales, so consumers will have access to fresh food. So now we're going to listen to our last key speaker, Jean Declean, from the World Economic Forum. Jean, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And it's very nice to be here today. I wish I could be there in person. That would have been very nice. I will be in Rome in a few weeks for the WUWM Food System Pre-Summit. So actually Italy will be my first place that I will visit professionally. So my name is Jean Declean. I'm an executive on the executive committee at the World Economic Forum, but I also have the privilege of co-leading the innovation lever of change for the WUWM Food System Summit. And so this year is obviously a key and pivotal year for the world, when we must get back on track in a way that's sustainable and safer and healthier and more inclusive for everyone. And so this is going to, for food, this is going to be critically important. It's going to require a comprehensive agenda for action to build back better across the whole food system. The blueprint for that action already exists in the form of the Sustainable Development Goals. But what is going to be so important is the way in which we build up cooperation to achieve that. And so we're going to need new and innovative partnerships, new systems thinking. We're going to need to break down the silos between different groups, between health and food, between the environment and food, between the farmer and the consumer. We need to break a lot of these silos that we have built up, and that will take collective work. It also requires a lot of good faith amongst the different communities to work together, particularly if we're going to put people at the centre of this building back better. But what is very clear is the urgency for action. I think the Food System Summit and the Secretary General calling for this unique food systems summit, so it's not just a food security summit, it's actually something that's looking at the whole food system, is quite powerful, and also making this a people's summit and a solutions summit. And I'll come back to that. But for today, for this meeting, I'd just like to make 3 observations. The first observation is that COVID has very much highlighted the frailties of our global food system. But also in many ways it showed that the food system is quite robust. This time last year, I was very worried when I looked at many things happening that actually the food system could really collapse, but it didn't. It withheld, but it showed that there are a number of structural risks that need to be addressed, and that an integrated multi-stakeholder response is required if we're going to address the food system and change the food system to be a successful food system of the future. And so that's the first observation, that we're facing a series of systemic risks, if that's health risks linked to global pandemic, linked to environmental risks, linked to the change of markets and the way in which we're looking at markets. It's going to require a much more systems focus rather than a single line approach to how we look at it. The second observation I'd like to make is that in adopting to this systemic risk, we're going to have to build multi-stakeholder platforms that allow us to adopt this systems approach, that allow us to look at environmental factors and health factors and local inclusion and efficiency in the system, all working together. And it's going to require new thinking of partnerships and platforms. So we're going to have to adopt the traditional partnership approach, which often saw one organisation working with 1 or 2 other partners to solve a particular problem. Okay, let's just look at food waste in this particular city. But if we look at that partnership, even though the partnership can be very important, if we look at that partnership in isolation, or just operate that partnership in isolation, it is very difficult to address the holistic systems change that we need. And so the principles of adopting this broader approach are simple. We need to focus on platforms of engagement rather than institutions. So we need to leave our individual institutional logos at the door, and we need to think about, right, how do we work collectively on this. We need to move beyond projects and pilots to building for scale. How do we not do a digital partnership that has 1,000 or 5,000 people involved in it? How do we build a digital partnership with farmers, between farmers and wholesale markets, between wholesale markets and consumers, that involves maybe 100 million people working across different countries? And so how do we think about that scale? How do we also look at creating the collective energy that we're working aligned rather than in a series of individual initiatives that don't talk to each other? And how do we make sure that there is strong alignment in these different initiatives? So one example of this as a partner for the forum, we have been working on the Food Action Alliance, which is a new generation of platform building that links different partners together. They're building up a coalition of organizations and initiatives who, through their collective action, will be able to actually have impact and strengthen agricultural value chain. And so it's about how would a series of flagship initiatives come together to support smallholder farmer in short, or to improve market logistics through digitization. And rather than looking at this individually, how can we do that through a platform of initiatives that in themselves are big initiatives coming together? And so what is the role of the wholesale union of wholesale market, the World Union of Wholesale Markets, coming and working with partners in this collective through something like the Food Action? So that is my second observation, is how do we think a lot more collectively around addressing some of these really significant initiatives at scale? And what is the role of wholesale markets in that? I think Christopher made the point earlier that wholesale markets play an incredibly important role as a bridge between the farmer and the consumer as an individual, or the consumer as the collective of the restaurant or through industry. And how do you do that? Much more dynamically. My third and final observation is that this is going to require a significant shift in innovation. That innovation is going to be critical for food systems transformation. And the food system is actually very behind in innovation. If I compare it to the health system or some of the other systems, food systems are actually a long way behind. So how do we catch up quickly? How does the food system invest into digital transformation, go the last mile, traceability that can be captured from all the way to market, to consumer, to capture those efficiencies in the value chain? How do we build up a network of innovation hubs in different countries? Every country is going to have its own innovation ecosystem. So how do we build up a network of innovation ecosystems in different areas, different regions, different countries, to really accelerate innovation? Because if we do not use innovation to change the food system, we will spend years basically trying to unpack a lot of the problems that come through these systemic challenges. So I'll just leave you with those three thoughts. We need to think about this systemically. We need a much broader thinking around partnerships and the coalitions we need to build to create scale, change. We need to think of the role of innovation much more dynamically to build up those ecosystems around the wholesale markets in the local areas in which you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for this presentation, that it's giving us another time. I think that I'm really grateful for all the different speakers that we had today in this roundtable, because each of you have a different scope and was enriching in a really concrete way and with concrete solutions and data the subject that we're trying today to solve and to give answer to, that is how to foster better diets worldwide. So, of course, we do agree, and I think that this morning we were speaking about how important it is to have a systemic approach and not a silo approach where we're just taking like every part of like the food system, but the whole food system, and not just the production, but also the distribution, the availability, the awareness, the education that is needed also in order to facilitate better choices. So, Simon, can you put the slides, please? So we don't have a lot of time. We were running a little bit out of time, but because we have like really interesting people that are joining us today in this roundtable, I do want to honor them in order to go to like some open questions. So we're going to have like 5 minutes of open questions. We will try to do our best to respond to all. So please, you can either take the floor, or if you prefer, you can also put them in the chat, and we're going to try to moderate them.
Yeah.
Dr. Yadav, do you want to ask something? Dr. Yadav? Yes, you have the floor. You can speak, we are hearing you. You can speak. Dr. Yadav, you can speak. I think that there is a problem on the sound on his side, so maybe if someone else want to ask a question.
Hello. Hello.
No. No questions. Okay, so I'm going to take the 5 minutes that we have left. Dr. Yadav, do you want to speak? He's from New Delhi, Kosambi market. Okay, so apparently he's having some problems with sound. So I will take these 5 minutes to ask the participant if they maybe because they come from like different words, and what are the actors, like a lot of you, what I'm like really happy to see today is that I think that this past year with the United Nations Food Systems Summit preparation, we are realizing more and more the importance of multi-stakeholder dialogues, and we had already developed like really serious platforms as the UNFSS CO Summit with Sean that were like participating also, and the Code of Conduct with the European Commission, and with Christopher that were also participating, and with it that we also aim to collaborate. So beyond all these multi-stakeholders platforms and dialogues that we're establishing right now, what do you think, how do you think that we can foster, and which actors can we engage now to have more concrete actions and to foster a little bit more this objective of having more people choosing and eating better, more equilibrated diets? I give the floor to our speakers, whoever wants to take it.
Hello, this is Mejia again. So
you can speak.
Well, I mentioned a couple of stakeholders. I mentioned the global food banking network, and in my humble opinion, can serve as a good connector, because currently they are lacking of fresh food to deliver to their beneficiaries. And this is something that in most of the cases, the wholesale market, you cannot process or insert. So I think that there is a huge opportunity to start working on these circular economy models with them, or at least to avoid, like wasting all of this food. The second, I would say, a stakeholder that might be important there is, and probably multiple ones, is farmer association. It's not only if we think about like the big farmers, but also the smallholder farmer associations, because they are lacking the possibility to connect with you guys or actually to develop or go to the main market. So I think that my colleague Jose Larco and Claudia Antonini are going to talk about that in the next roundtable, so I'm not going to spoil too much about it. But the third one is actually related to something that was mentioned by one of the persons live there in Florence, in Firenze, and it's the fact that we start need to connecting more to the retailers as well. So these associations might become also important to, let's say, canalize or to channel a little bit more of the products that you have in the wholesale market. So I think that would be super important to start like creating like an ecosystem, a collaborative ecosystem to make this happen.
Thank you. Does some other one of our speakers wants to say something?
Maybe I can also complement. Can you hear me?
Please. Who raised their hand? Alexandra, yes, you can take the floor.
Yes. So it is clear, I think, that there is not only one solution to how to help people to shift to more healthy diets, how to make healthier food accessible. We have to work on several levels. As I said, to count on collaboration, voluntary action, but also on legislation. And I mentioned some of the legislative initiatives that the Commission is preparing to inform consumers to have mandatory public procurement. What I forgot also to mention is education and awareness, because we have to link the market to consumer demand and to consumer expectation. And this is what also the Farm to Fork strategy is doing, is putting the consumer in the center of the transition and the citizen of the transition to sustainable food system. So we need to boost the demand for more sustainable and for healthier choice. And in this regard, their education, consumer awareness, communication plays also a key role. And there we see a role both from the food business operators and the food supply chain, but also from public authorities at all levels, including a national level and also local, regional level.
Thank you, Alexandra. Okay, so I think that we're really running out of time, and I'm like really thankful for each of the speakers that we had in this interesting roundtable. And of course, there is not one solution, but a pathway, a multi-stakeholder dialogue and answers to be applied with a systemic view in order to tackle this issue that implies and conveys a lot of challenges for us. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to proceed with this same link in around 7 minutes with the next roundtable that is going to be focused in innovation. As Jan was saying before, one of the key solutions we do think also with him that is in innovation and digitalization. So in 7 minutes we're coming back to have a roundtable about this subject. Thank you very much to everyone, and see you in a couple of minutes. for the one that wants to stay, or the speakers in the next table, you can stay here, and we're going to resume the meeting in around 7 minutes. 7? Yes.